So recently I've been watching the situation in Sri Lanka purely out of interest because I still have some family living there. And, the responses we're getting from there is that life is really tough, extremely tough. And I want to shed some light on the current situation. So, how much does Sri Lanka currently owe in its debt crisis?
Sri Lanka actually owes about 29 billion US dollars in debt over the next 5 years.
And what are the interest payments?
And our interest payments alone make up about 2/3 of government revenue.
And how about the coming payments? How much is it?
And we only have reserves now at about 3.13 billion US dollars. And that's, of course, due to a recent currency swap with China.
So then, what do you think of this restructuring that Sri Lanka is asking from China? What are they after?
Well, I think one thing to mention is that this is not new. Sri Lanka has asked for debt referrals before in 2020, for example. But yeah, there are options for Sri Lanka. They include, of course, leveraging our strategic geopolitical relationships between India and China, but also defaulting and coming up with a kind of a more permanent solution to Sri Lanka's economic problems, most of which I would argue are structural and not a result of one payment or another, but the result of Sri Lanka not being able to have enough income and not being able to have enough government revenue to pay off debts it's been taking for a long period of time. So coming up with a more permanent solution to its debt sustainability problem.
Well, what are some of the domestic policies that have sort of contributed towards this current situation? I know it's not just China, but how's the government handled this?
Sri Lanka's problems, of course, aren't just due to Chinese debt. I think actually Chinese debt only accounts for about 10% of Sri Lanka's external debt, and most of our debt is actually owed to markets. The causes of Sri Lanka's debt situation, its current situation and its economic crisis is actually, it's complicated. A lot of this has to do with excessive borrowing in the aftermath of the financial crisis and the loose monetary policy that follows this crisis, but also due to, as I mentioned before, certain structural shortcomings in our economy, a low tax to GDP ratio, for example, barriers to trade, inefficient public expenditure. We spend more on defense now in peacetime than we did during the Civil War. Of course, all of this is exacerbated by the pandemic, lockdowns, border closures, the change in tourist arrivals to our country. And some of this is a result of domestic economic policy, as you put it. Sri Lanka not doing what it needs to do to take accountability and responsibility for this economic crisis and these economic shortcomings, and instead actually doing things to aggravate the situation. So lowering taxes for the wealthy, increasing tax holidays for corporations, introducing ad hoc policies like chemical fertilizer ban, which actually is really debilitating to our agricultural sector, and doing things like imposing blanket import bans, which in my opinion is an unsustainable policy.
So, how are these policies affecting the general man on the street? How is it impacting them?
Look at the way the popularity of the ruling regime kind of has changed in 2019 when the president was elected, and in 2020 when the parliament, the Rajapaksa family and their party came to parliament. They were at the height of their popularity, so they had more. They were more popular than they were when the government had just won a complete military victory. And now, if you look at what's happening on the ground, you see shortages of medicine, gas, milk powder, year-on-year inflation being around 8%. the threat of like power shortages because we can't afford to supply fuel to thermal power plants, and you can really see how the popularity of our elected public representatives has really drastically changed over the last 2 years, and how people are like really suffering, I think, in Sri Lanka.
So it looks like it's going to be another tough year for Sri Lanka and all the people there. I feel really sorry for them. I've been keeping track of the news just out of interest, it's sad when you elect people that are incompetent to run the country, who haven't had a grounding in politics. These are the outcomes.